Okay, so we're going to take a look at the trolls now, and there may not be 10 of them. There are only 7 types of trolls, in fact, but I figured that was enough to at least rank them in the order of how good they are. And, you know, trolls are a pretty important part of the orc factions anyway. It's a big part of how they can outmuscle in terms of melee, because a lot of their infantry, of course, is not going to be able to cut it against some of the elite infantry of, like, the elves and the dwarves in particular. So you're going to need something like the trolls to equalise that somewhat, so they are an important part of the gameplay, so I will cover them, and we'll start at number 7. So at number 7 we have the troll catapult, and now I do mean the troll catapult in terms of a melee force, not when you have the artillery firing, because that is something that you can't really quantify too easily. Potentially the troll catapult could be the best of these units if it gets all of its hits and gets a decent amount of casualties inflicted from it. Or potentially it could be the worst as it is, because it may not get very many hits at all. But in melee, they are certainly the worst trolls, mainly because they have considerably less in terms of hit points. They only have 5 hit points, so while there are quite a few of them actually, in melee they really aren't as durable as their brethren, and that's what puts them down at number 7. They are still a pretty good investment though, because they are cheaper, and when you run out of ammo, unlike a standard catapult crew, they will do the job of a troll pretty nicely in terms of causing a bit of a break in the enemy line, but they will not stand up to punishment as well as all of the other trolls on the list. And with that, we'll get on to the trolls proper from number 6 onwards. So at number 6 we have the mountain trolls, and the mountain trolls are always the weakest amongst their brethren, aside from the troll catapult, in melee, and that is still the case here. They have 30 attack, 29 defense, and 10 charge, and they have 7 hit points. They instill fear, they have good armor and stamina, and they're good versus armor. These are all standard troll traits. But yeah, the mountain trolls are always the weakest amongst the trolls in vanilla, and that's still the case here. Trolls, in terms of their power, have gone down a little bit. They used to be extremely strong. They are still strong, but they can be counteracted by a decent armor-piercing unit. Shock infantry in particular, the elite stuff like the Haven Guard and the Sindar Blade Masters will do very nicely against trolls. It's a good target to take out. Particularly seeing as if you're the orc faction and you've brought trolls, it's going to be where the bulk of your money has been spent, because they don't come cheap. Mountain trolls slightly cheaper than the others, of course. 1,000 florins is still a decent investment in something which can be taken out more easily than it used to be able to. Nonetheless, still a decent unit, can still cause some damage, can still break enemy lines if you're not prepared to deal with the trolls. But yeah, the mountain trolls still the lowest amongst the trolls, but we'll see some other familiar units as we move up the list, and we'll go to number 5. And just like in vanilla, the ones just ahead of the mountain trolls are the cave trolls with their giant mallets. And their stats are slightly better. They have 34 attack, 30 defense, and 12 charge. They also have 7 hit points, and they of course have the same sort of stats. They instill fear, good armor and stamina, etc. You know, the slightly higher stats are what put them ahead of them. And honestly, the cave trolls were always a decent investment, mainly because they were just as cheap as the mountain trolls. Now they are slightly more expensive than the mountain trolls, so it's been balanced a little better. They still have the same problem as the mountain trolls though. Like, if you misuse trolls, they will die off pretty quickly in Reforged, which is good because it means you can more efficiently counteract them. In the past, it was always the case that the trolls would always get a ton of kills no matter what you did, really, unless they charged into pike line. But the cave trolls, you know, 7 hit points, you know, they share that trait with the mountain trolls. All the trolls from here on out will have 8 hit points, which is what distinguishes them. Nonetheless, they are good. You'll often see the Misty Mountains using these guys if they want to save a bit of money for their infantry line. A good unit. You know, all of the trolls will function in the same way, it's just how effective they are at doing it. And the cave trolls, slightly better than the mountain trolls, but not quite as good as the higher tier trolls with 8 hit points, and that's all that really needs to be said for them. So, number 4, in the past, these guys, the snow trolls, were the only ones that could hold a candle to Mordor's trolls. They have been downgraded a little bit because of the addition of 2 new melee trolls. But they are still very, very effective. Their stats are significantly better than the other 2 we've seen, well, 3 I suppose, that we've seen so far. They have 42 attack, 43 defense, and 24 charge. They actually have significantly the best charge of all the trolls. Although it's not really as important because most trolls will knock enemy infantry aside on the charge regardless. So the slightly higher charge means they will kill more on the initial charge. But they have, well, they instill fear, they have excellent armor and stamina, and they are good versus armor. 8 hit points, of course, so a very well-rounded unit, significantly better than the other 2 we've seen so far. They will survive a lot longer and they will do a bit more damage. Although it is worth saying that the same weaknesses still apply. Any armor-piercing unit that goes up against these guys will trade pretty efficiently with them, and the snow trolls are still pretty expensive as well, as expected. The Misty Mountains have access to these guys now, though, and they're the best trolls that the Misty Mountains can deploy, so they will probably be using these guys, whereas Gundabad, Isengard, and Mordor all have slightly better trolls, really. But the snow trolls still a very deadly force if they are used correctly. But we'll now move on to the top 3, and they include 2 of the new units. Moving on to the trolls that sport a bit more heavy armor, we have the trolls of Gundabad with 42 attack, 44 defense, and 20 charge. They're actually similar in terms of stats to the snow trolls, but they will outlast the snow trolls in melee, and that's really the important thing. Trolls' survivability is something you really need to focus on, and the trolls of Gundabad are slightly better at that. They have 8 hit points as well, of course. They instill fear. They also have a stat where they are good versus Cav, in addition to all of the other standard troll stuff. Most trolls will do very well against Cav, that was always the case, but the trolls of Gundabad particularly will be able to deal a great deal of damage to them, and it's a good way for Gundabad to be able to zone out cavalry, keep these guys in reserve, only commit them to the melee fight if they're needed, and make sure that the enemy Cav is kept away, because one of the problems the evil factions always have, while they do have good Cav of their own now in Reforged, they aren't able to field it in the same sort of numbers that some of the good factions are able to, like Gondor or Rohan. So the Trolls of Gundabad can be a good way to zone them out, because Cav is not going to want to get into a fight with these guys. They look cool as well. I mean, the texture on the horn is kind of strange if you get up close to it, but from a distance, the Trolls of Gundabad are a very menacing looking unit. There are 2 other trolls that are better though, and we'll now move on to number 2. So at number 2 we have Isengard's Trolls of the White Hand, and with 44 attack, 46 defense, and 18 charge in addition to their 8 hit points. Good versus Cav, armor, good in the snow as well, fear, excellent armor of their own. They are a real force to be reckoned with, and Isengard's problem in vanilla was always the fact that while Berserkers were good, they didn't offer the same sort of punch as Trolls. But now they do have Trolls of their own. They are significantly expensive, of course, the same price as the Trolls of Gundabad and the unit which placed at number 1, which I'm sure you'll know what it is by now if you played vanilla. But the Trolls of the White Hand are a very nasty unit if used correctly. Isengard are a pretty expensive army to field, so the Trolls of the White Hand are a big commitment, and it will significantly affect how Isengard play. You won't be seeing a great deal of pikes or crossbows if you're investing heavily in your Trolls, most likely, which does change how Isengard play, but nonetheless, the Trolls of the White Hand, very, very deadly. Got to be careful of them. They will chew your Cav up as well, so it's not like you can just charge them with Cav. Pikes, as always, a very good way of dealing with Trolls. Crossbows can also shred off their hit points quite nicely because of the armor-piercing capability. But it's hard to counteract Trolls. It may have gotten slightly easier in Reforged, but it's still not a walk in the park. And the Trolls of the White Hand are some of the best to take advantage of their muscle. But there is one unit which is better, and of course it's unchanged from vanilla. One thing that Mordor can boast over the other Orc factions that have received significant buffs is that they still have the best of the Trolls, and that is still the Olag-hai. In terms of stats, we're looking at 43 attack, 49 defense, and 19 charge. 8 hit points, of course, and it inspires fear, good versus armor, excellent armor, and all that. They are the most durable in melee of the Trolls, which really is what nets them this position. They will last the longest against some of the new threats that the Trolls face, which really is all important now. The Trolls' survivability has been called into question, and the Olag-hai have been able to stand the most firm. And it is also an important weapon for Mordor, because having the best Trolls is something they still have, whereas Gundabad have received some significant buffs, particularly in terms of their infantry, which Mordor, they have received, but not to the same extent, which means Mordor need to leverage some of their other assets. And I always likened Mordor's box of tricks to being what really set them apart from Gundabad and the Misty Mountains in vanilla, and that is still kind of the case. Gundabad has closed the gap significantly, but I still think that Mordor overall offers a bit more potency, and this is one of the units that's responsible for that because of how efficiently the Olag-hai get their killing done, and that's what puts the Olag-hai at number 1 still. And that was the Trolls. So that was a shorter list, but I still felt that it needed to be done because of how important a part of the game Trolls are, and I will be doing the skirmishes next because the new patch is out, of course. I'm thinking that I'm going to be separating the crossbows and the archers into their own lists. So one of those two will be next, probably the crossbows because it's slightly shorter and more straightforward. The archers may take a little bit more time to really get to grips with, but one of those two will be next, and I hope to see you there for it.